Hello everyone and welcome to The Information, where you'll get all the information on the latest in electronic, indie pop, and experimental music. Today we have an album review. We're reviewing the new DJ Richard album, Iræ Xerox. Now for those unfamiliar, DJ Richard, he is an electronic music producer based out of Rhode Island of all places. He's known mostly for his take on raw and minimal ambient music and techno and ambient house. He's been putting out music since about 2012, and this new album of his here comes on the heels of an EP called Path of Ruin, which he put out late last year. This is also his sophomore LP. His debut record, Grind, came out on Dial Records back in 2015, and this new record of his here is also out on Dial Records as of last month. There's a lot of dark, brooding, industrial music here, a lot of electronic dance music that sounds like it was found on a tape from the early 80s, late 70s that was just like left out in the sun and then probably run over by a car or two. Take for example the intro track here, which is also the title track. It's really just a 2.5 minute ambient intro, but it really sets the tone nicely. It's pretty much just the same 4 chords repeated for the length of the song, but the chords do kind of get detuned slightly as the song progresses. And the thing that I liked most about this intro, the reason that it made me want to talk about it, was the white noise, kind of like that surface level hiss that you hear throughout the song. Instead of just staying dormant like, the noise normally would, he pans the white noise from channel to channel so it like doesn't sit still, and it kind of like tickles your ears as the song progresses. It almost puts an image in my mind of like a cobra or a snake or something, like sizing up its prey and like focusing before it's about to strike, something like that. The first real song that we get here is the second track, Pitfall. It kicks off quite literally with some very crispy kick drums and hi-hats and snares. I believe it's the same kind of drum kit that was used in the Andy Stott song Science and Industry, if that gives you a kind of idea of the timbre and texture of these drums here. There's some burbling effects and synthesizers here as well that make a very murky sound. A synth bass line gets introduced later on in the track, this descending, like doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. It's almost like a horror kind of soundtrack, just like the traditional descending melodies. The song overall has a very industrial, dark tone to it. It sounds like a bad guy like patrolling an alleyway looking for somebody to beat up or something. And even though I find the synth bass line to be a little bit stale, that's not the most egregious element of the track. I find the fade out on this song to be incredibly lazy, and I find that is unfortunately a running theme throughout the record here. I hear a lot of fade outs, especially on some of the longer tracks here too. On the next track here, Vanguard, the industrial palette is expanded even more. We get a vibrating, pulsating synth bass here, some classic Lindrum side sticks, and a little bit of 808 percussion as well. With this song in particular, the snare, when it hits, it almost sounds like you can hear the artifacts of the snare, like he stretched it out or had to pitch it up for the song or something like that. It sounds really weird to be able to hear, at least to me, what sounds like the artifacts, like the little digital remnants of the snare being manipulated in some way that kind of rubs me the wrong way. Not too long into the track, we're introduced to a very dancey, again, like a horror movie-esque soundtrack kind of synth arpeggio. Very bright, very plinky, very thin. It sounds like the arpeggiator is stuck on random. It's just kind of like do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. There's not really much order to me, the way that the notes kind of hit. And yet again, before I can really appreciate the song properly, it fades itself out again. And this is a 6.5 minute song too, so if you can't fit your full palette of ideas into a 6.5 minute song, that you have to fade it out at the end, I just feel like it comes across as lazy, honestly. Things do pick up pretty quickly with this song after this, called Tunnel Stalker. This song to me gave me the strongest Actress vibes on the record. On the first listen or two, it sounded like the bass line and the drum beat were on competing time signatures, like the bass line was in 3/4 and the kick drum was in like 4/4. But I think after listening to it a few more times, I think what happens here is just that the bass line is doing like triplet notes, and the kick drum is just the basic like 4/4. It's very disorienting. I think that's pretty deliberate. Like your feet want to dance to it, but your brain is like trying to comprehend the two different layers of bass and drums, and like it's not really lining up correctly. Around the minute 40 mark here, there's a really fantastic springy synth line that comes in. It almost sounds like the sound that it makes when you were like 4 or 5 years old, and those like little door jams, those springy door jams on the back of your door, when you would just flick them and like watch them vibrate and make that noise. That's the noise that first came into my head the first time I heard that sound. And every time those notes hit, it kind of bounces around the mix in headphones. It almost sounds like there's like this box in there somewhere, and it's like bouncing off each wall, and then it returns to where it originally started, and you hear it at the full volume, and then it goes back and bounces around the walls again. It's a very cool effect. Does the track need to be 5.5 minutes? No, it does not, but at least it doesn't fade out, and the instrumentation choices here are more imaginative and more inventive and creative than the previous tracks, I think, so far. So this one was definitely the highlight of the album for me. The next song on here, In Broad Daylight, despite the name, pretty much has no daylight to be found whatsoever. This is definitely one of the darker and more sinister songs on the record for sure. It's hostile, it's a lot of doom and gloom. It's a fairly straightforward, minimal dance beat. There are some echoey toms here as well that kind of keep the pace. The percussion is very sharp, metallic, and stinging, and there are some very sour, what I think are some like minor synth pads here, and the synth lead that comes over top of that is also extremely sinister and provides a good counterpoint to the song. We're towards the back half of the record at this point, and we get an onslaught of ambient songs, the first of which being Ancestral Helm. This is definitely a very regal sounding song, as you again can tell by the title. There's washes of ambient drones here. It sounds very classy, but in sort of like a gothic kind of way. And the track that immediately follows this is an even longer ambient piece called Final Mercy. This one to me is definitely just one of the more straightforward, gorgeous ambient pieces on the record. There's a plinky reverb synth here over some really glassy pads. I do feel though that some drums on this track would have given it that extra dimension, that extra oomph, to really make it even more memorable. But of course I understand that ambient music has to kind of exist as ambient music, or else it becomes something else entirely. And if anything, the worst thing I can say about this track is that I don't really think that the two longer ambient tracks, one after another, were really necessary. I think the flow of the record kind of gets bogged down around this section here. The track that follows that is called X-Air, or X-Airy. I'm not really sure how you pronounce it. Again, it's another Latin translation. And for those of you who have heard DJ Richard's previous album, Grind, this one, to me, basically is the vampire dub of the record. It comes towards the end of the album. It's one of the longer songs here. It's pretty much just a very patient 7/2/7 kick drum pattern here. And the stiff drum machine really creates a good contrast to the heavenly synth drone, I would kind of categorize it as. There's some atonal white noise that kind of bounces around the track and kind of pops in and pops back out again. And then after yet another smaller ambient interlude, we are introduced to the final track, Gate of Roses. This is another one of the more beat-driven tracks on the album that you heard more so on the first half of the record. I like the thumping kick drum pattern here and the haunted house synthesizer melody going on. The chord progression of da-da-dum, dum-dum. It really gives the track a sense of oncoming dread, like you're a single person going into a spooky rainy castle with like just a torch and no idea of what's inside. There really isn't much to the first minute of this track. It kind of builds very slowly, and then right around the minute mark we do get some skittering, clattering percussion here. There's a very chunky, intimidating synth bass line as well. But with the track being only 3 minutes and 19 seconds, it really only gives about 2.5 minutes for the song to really do its thing, and then it kind of just ends, like it cuts itself off right at the end. Again, because of the recurring theme of the fade outs, which at this point we've had about like 4 or 5, to have one of the shorter tracks, let alone the final track of the album, just cut itself off like that, it's infuriating is too strong of a word, but that's the word that comes to mind. I guess just aggravating. It just aggravates me. This would have been the perfect time for a fade out because you're ending the record. You're kind of wanting to stay in the atmosphere of the album and the song in particular. And he just doesn't give you that. He just kind of pulls the rug out from under you after you've come to expect fade outs, especially. So to kind of subvert that and then do it on the last track of the album, I think is kind of like a little bit of a troll move, maybe. To me, the thing that bogs this record down is the flow, especially towards the middle and latter back half of the album when it gets more ambient and a lot longer songs. The thin, brittle percussion here, pretty much from track to track, there's just like no middle end to speak of. It's just either like the thumping, deep-fried lows of the kicks and the throbbing, like, sawtooth synth bass lines, or the really crispy, brittle percussion that's just clanging away. And I thought some of the songs didn't really do much in the way of progress. This is definitely a very minimal album, despite it being rooted in, like, industrial and EBM and ambient music. You know, at the end of the day, can I say I enjoyed the album? No. Can I say I would return to the album? Besides Tunnel Stalker, not really. That being said, I would be hard-pressed to say that I still wouldn't recommend this album. I would definitely suggest you check it out because my opinion is just my opinion. I mean, you guys can take a listen to the record, and if you do, or at least if you just want to take a listen to one song off the record and see if the palette is kind of your thing or not, just check out Tunnel Stalker. I think that's definitely like a good high point for the record, and if you dig it, or if you dig Actress and Andy Stott, you know, the other artists that I've kind of name dropped here throughout the review, I think you will find something to like here. And I thought I would too, but unfortunately, for the previously mentioned reasons here, I kind of didn't really find a lot of replayability here. So overall, I would give this thing maybe like a light 5. But again, let me know what you guys thought of this record. Do you have a favorite track, least favorite track? You know, did you think my opinion was accurate or off base? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to like it and share it around if you agree or just want to get the word out, because I am still trying to grow my channel here slowly but surely. I do have a couple more album reviews lined up. I'm going to try to get the Parquet Courts record review taken care of. I know that's been about a month or two as well. Got a few other records that I'm looking to knock out as well. I still want to talk about the new Grouper record, even though I haven't seen a lot of people really mention it, and it is one of her shorter offerings. I do definitely love Grouper a lot, so I do want to be able to use this channel as a medium to talk about her. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. This has been The Information.